Welcome to Science and Wisdom Live, where scientists and meditators meet.
So Mark, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in astrophysics and Zen Buddhism?
So I had a bit of a few traumatic events that happened to me when I was young, particularly in my teenage years. And I think, so reflecting on it now, I see that people respond to these kinds of traumas in different ways. And my particular way of dealing with things was to basically distance myself from emotions, to cut myself off from the feeling, and to divert my attention towards study. And that, I suppose, worked in my favor in terms of academic study. So, I went to university, I studied astrophysics. I went on and did a master's and then a PhD. But along the way there, some things were happening, in my personal life. Well, not happening, I suppose, in my personal life.
Mm.
So I ended up with a PhD, but I also ended up doing psychotherapy at that point, maybe in my mid-20s or something, for an intense period for a few years. And that got me more moving in a different direction. And then I met my Zen teacher, in that time. And then I started to sort of engage a little bit with meditation practice.
Is your Zen tradition, does it focus more on experiential level of understanding, or are there some explicit teachings on the nature of reality, from the Zen Buddhist perspective, how the universe exists, how things came to be, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from the way it's been taught to me, Zen practice is far more about what do you find? Find what you find, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's all the theory that can come later.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember when I first met my Zen teacher, he said to me, well, I was in the middle of academia at the time. So he said to me, Mark, treat your body like a lab. We have these methods. So just follow these methods, and the conclusions are not known. So other people have found their things, but you just perform these experiments in your own body, in your own lab, and see what you find. And I think that really appealed to me. It was very much like not about reading the books and the philosophy and
Mm-hmm.
the teachings and there's a lot of cosmological grandiose ideas in Zen, but none of that was there at the beginning. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
But you have found some connection between, your science and your Buddhism, and part of this, I think, as we were preparing for this, there's this notion of equipment. That scientists need a lot of equipment to study the universe and to reveal its mysteries. But my understanding is you've talked a little bit about how ordinary people, without the use of expensive equipment, can open up to the beauty and the complexity of our universe too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, I mean, I get the sense that people who want to engage with astronomy feel like they need to know what they're looking at. They need
Mm-hmm.
maps, they need an app on their phone, and, maybe they need a telescope or binoculars or whatever, something like that. And I really, really think that none of that is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to see, actually, that none of that is necessary. Like, looking at the dark sky and being awed by all the stars has really nothing to do with star maps and constellations and things. In fact, actually, the information almost clouds, gets in the way, of having that experience of being under the night sky. So I really think that all you need to do is, on a nice dark night, go outside, lie down, and just look, and just kind of like immerse yourself in that experience of being with the stars and being like, wow. Yeah, don't worry
There
about
was, I bet you've seen it, but there was a movie recently with Werner Herzog about meteorites. I think it's called Fireball. And he went to Maui and interviewed the people who look at they have an early warning system there where they're looking at the whole sky, looking for, asteroids and comets coming into Earth's range. And in the movie, it was amazing because their control center for looking at, there's this beautiful telescope at the top of Haleakala, and their little control room is way down in the little town. And in the movie, Werner Herzog, for the very first time, he takes those astronomers up to the telescope. They'd actually never been to the place where their telescope is, just to look up. So
Yeah.
was there a particular moment when you came to realize that this idea of mindful stargazing could be a practice to ground ourselves, to become more present?
So I decided to shift out of astronomy,
Mm-hmm.
and then I spent some time teaching yoga and developing my business here in London. And then my wife got this opportunity to take a job contract on this tiny island called Saint Helena. Saint Helena is halfway between Africa and South America in the South Atlantic, and it's one of the most remote islands in the world. It's a British island, so we went there for 2 years. We just got back, in fact, so we've been out there the last 2 years, and the night sky is incredibly dark out there. There is basically no light pollution, and I think I started to reconnect with just looking at the night sky, being there, really. It was like nice weather, so you'd be able to step outside and enjoy and then there was dark skies. And I really found that very magical, very reconnecting for me back to why I got into astronomy in the first place. And I'd already started to think about, I had this first book called Mindful Thoughts for Stargazers, and that's really a whole lot of contemplations really around science and astronomy and mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had this second book that I was thinking about that's now called the Mindful Universe. And so this book contains some actual meditations, some guided meditations in there. I think that came out of me just going outside and looking up and kind of reconnecting to that magic. Yeah.
And in cities today, I think a lot of people maybe never look up, and even if they do, they don't see much, right? What do you think people are missing by not having access to that kind of rich, beautiful sky that we evolved with?
Well, that's it. I think that's it. We evolved with it. Since I've said to people before when we've done like stargazing evenings that when you look around the planet at our natural world, every single thing has changed since humanity evolved on this planet. There's been earthquakes and volcanoes and what have you. Sea level rises, all that business. Everything has changed. The only view that we have that is in common since the very beginning of humanity is the night sky. It is essentially the same patterns of stars, the same movements that every single human has ever seen since we've been looking up. And I find that deep, like very, very connecting to our humanity. And that's really where lots of questions about what is this? Where do we come from? What is this darkness and the stars and things? And I think living in a city where we just look up and see orange, it's very sad. Like we miss that part. It's like living in a place where you can't see green, or you've never been to the beach. That kind of thing. It's kind of just a sad missing part of our humanity.
Yeah, if you look at the history of civilization, it seems that looking at the stars was the trigger for almost everything, for our thoughts about gods and mythology and cause and effect, and then eventually science. Like, would we have ever even developed science without the stars to wonder about as we look up, right?
Right, exactly. There are movements, around trying to raise awareness around light pollution and that in the city. I think it's like a forgotten part of the pollution that humans inflict, I suppose, on the world. Lots of things, we know about oil and the greenhouse gases and things, but I think the light pollution, people maybe are not aware of it so much, and aware of how important it is, not just for our ability to see the stars, but also for our sleep patterns, for the animal life, all sorts.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't know what they're missing even too. It's you have to go quite deep into the wilderness to see the stars like that. It's only a couple times a year for myself for sure that I go somewhere dark enough I can see the Milky Way and the dimmer stars. I wonder if that would change the way people thought about themselves. Even if we could each every night see the type of stars that our ancestors saw. I don't know. In your recent books, you argue that we're less separate from the universe than we usually realize. I wonder if you could explain that a little bit further, and how can acknowledging this help bring more meaning to our lives?
Yeah, well, I think this is the central, the central point of Zen practice. When we are born, as a baby, we are 100% just one with the universe. There's no sense of me being separate from anything. We're just we are. And then, like, very naturally, as we grow up, we develop a sense of, this is me, this is it, this is my parents, this is, the separateness. And it's almost like a definition of an adult, really, is the fact that we know that what is me and what I need to take care of and be responsible for, and what is the rest of the world and other things. But like one of my teachers would say that this is not the end point. There's a sort of next step that comes after this. And that's really understanding that we're not really separate. It's just an illusion. It's just a perspective. So I think it, adds this. So we start off in the world of like duality. It's like, this is me and this is you, and this is a wall, this is the floor, and this is what I'm doing and this is what you're doing. And then it's like as we look more and more deeply into that, we start to see more and more how, well, that's not exactly the way it is, right? So I like to use this analogy of mountain range. So you can imagine a mountain range, and maybe you're looking at it from above, and it's a misty morning, and all you can see are the peaks sticking up from outside the clouds. So each peak is like each individual person, like you and me, or whatever. We're just seeing those peaks, and we perceive that we're separate and we're distinct. But then maybe as the morning goes on and the sun comes up, the mist starts to clear, and we start to see more and more how, look, that peak goes down and there's the valley, and it comes up the other side and there's the other peak. So that other perspective says, oh, we're not separate. We look separate, but we're connected. It's like saying my left hand and my right hand, like here in the screen, they look separate, but then you start to realize, they're just all part of this one. So it's the same idea, as we look more clearly, more closely at, our selves and our universe, then we start to see this other perspective. And sometimes it can come kind of like in a bit of a flash, right? We say, oh my gosh, our camera lens just suddenly changes, and we see the valley floor, and we see how we're all connected. Yeah.
And what's the method for that, particularly that either that you write about or that you've experienced in your own practice?
So I think Zen provides one method, but there are many, many methods, and lots of spiritual traditions talk about other methods. Essentially, it's whatever it takes to look closely at our reality and how we relate to the world and how we perceive the world. And sometimes, in Zen, it would emphasize the quiet sitting meditation, that the stillness, where we basically remove all the other distractions. So we're just sitting. But nevertheless, even in sitting meditation, there are many distractions, and it's very hard to keep looking. So there are other methods like, in Zen, they use a koan, or, there might be some movement, there might be, flowing movement, something which basically keeps you on it and keeps you looking. Yeah, whatever it takes.
And in your books, do you talk about other techniques besides that, the Zen techniques of, quiet looking?
There's a nice one I really like. So if you go outside and then you get a nice view of the sky, the night sky, all the stars and things, Doesn't have to be, but it's kind of nice if you've got some stars. And then if you just focus on your out breath and let the breath just dissolve into the space around, into the sky. And of course, the sky goes atmosphere into space, into the universe. So you kind of let your breath just breathe out, dissolving into the universe outside. And then you start to breathe in and notice how the breath dissolves to the inner body, into your inner space. And then after you've done that for a bit, you can combine the two. Your breath dissolves outwards and your breath dissolves inwards. And then you start to see, okay, well, where does my breath end? Where does me end? Where does the universe start? Well, there is no end. There is no distinction. There is no edge. And you gradually begin to merge, and you start to experientially feel that merging and that togetherness until there's just breathing, right? There is just breathing. It's like the universe breathing. I feel like that kind of takes us towards that.
Yeah, that's very nice, watching your breath. This may be slightly out of your field of expertise or what you write about, but I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the origin of life and consciousness and its relationship to the evolution of the universe. Just a small question. Could you talk about your view on this subject, and at least what you'd be comfortable talking about, and how it's influenced by your meditation practice, your scientific background, and so on?
I think asking what is the origin of life is a little bit like saying, what's the origin of a star or a galaxy, or even what's the origin of an atom of hydrogen? So when we consider the origin or the development of the universe, it leads us to seeing that the causes and conditions that lead to the creation of anything, like our star, like the sun, for example. The sun was created 5 billion years ago. Came into the whole solar system was created, and it was created because of a whole series of events, conditions that came before that set up the conditions for the formation of the sun, the solar system, the planets, and then the rocks and the life and all the rest of it. So it's like all of us are a consequence of the evolution of the universe. Like the conditions were set at the beginning of the universe for things to just evolve as they've evolved, and there's nothing we can do to it's just an inevitability, right? So the universe had those particular conditions that allowed the play of events that have come to create us in this today, right? Yeah, we're sort of almost like a product of the continuous change, the dance, if you like, of the changing processes of the universe. All of its complexity, all of its beauty, right, comes out of that change. And I think that, in Buddhism, they call this dependent origination. This idea that all the causes and conditions are all in place for the arising of each moment. The whole universe contributes to the arising of this moment, each moment. Yeah, anything change. It's just kind of amazing that a single thing changes at the very edge of the universe. We create different conditions in the whole universe for a different future. Everything is so dependent, interlinked. The other thing that occurred to me was that seeing life and consciousness, and particularly people get a bit hung up, on self-aware consciousness. Seeing that as different or distinct from anything else in the universe is we're in the world of duality. We're in the world of separateness, of discrimination. So life, consciousness, volcanoes, stars, forces in an atom, they're all just things, or not things, they're processes that are going on in this universe, all just a product of how this universe is evolving. So, how did the life and the consciousness evolve? Well, because that's the universe.
I like the way you talk about life that way, because it's a lot like what you were saying of the illusion of separateness. believing that we're an independent self separate from the universe. What you just said about life is that there's an inevitability to life, that life's a natural consequence of the universe rather than an extremely special event, the way that we sometimes think about it. So that's a nice point of view I actually haven't heard before. It's very nice.
Well, I think when I first started to read a little bit the Buddhist sutras and things, there was, from the word go, there was never a sense that Earth was special. It talks about life on Earth and all the other various myriad worlds, as many worlds as there are grains of sand on the Ganges River, that kind of thing. And the Buddhas that existed amongst many, many worlds in the past and all the infinite worlds in the universe. And I think that seems to really connect with what we understand about the universe. I mean, why should life on Earth be special? Why should there not be life? I mean, there may be life on other planets, and the rest of the universe is vast, so why not? And as I say, just a consequence of the dynamic movement of the universe.
Yeah, in Tibetan Buddhism, they even talk about, they get very, very specific, and I'm not sure how much of this I believe myself, but they get very specific and say there's four nearby planets, where there's life, but this is the best one for meeting the Dharma and so on. I don't know. It may be out of date way of viewing the universe, but yeah, even in Tibetan Buddhism, of course, they talk a lot about other planets and other forms of life. So maybe science is catching up gradually with that point of view.
Yeah. I think it's quite nice in Zen. We actually study the koan, what is life, as a question, as a point of our meditation practice. And so the point of that, again, is just to try to break through the idea that life is something different or special, or it's something that's ungraspable. We can embody life. That's the direction of the koan, is to be life. This is it. You and I sitting here. This is it. Life right now.
How does the koan go? Is it just that? What is life, or is there?
Yeah. So there's a whole load of very traditional koans that have a whole backstory and things that come out of records of masters and things, and then some much more simple koans. Like, who am I? What is life? That we tend to study. At least we do in our particular branch. Yeah, they're kind of nice because they're very accessible, and they're put in the English language, and they're not translated. They're very to the point, so it's nice.
And there's nothing more than that in terms of instruction. Just what is life, and then you search yourself for the answer. Is that how it goes?
So you're looking to become the answer. Like, you go to the teacher and you say, I've discovered what life is. Life is this and this and this. And of course, at that point, the teacher's like, well, as soon as you say life is this, there's an idea of concept, there's separateness, there's an otherness.
Duality.
If we can inhabit and embody life and be life, that's it.
So I see. So to just become that question, to just to kind of wash into it.
That's it. And when we become life, we become the universe. Everything.
It reminds me a little bit of, in the Karma Kagyu tradition, I did a retreat once, and we had a 1-hour meditation session where at the beginning, the only instruction was, don't meditate. Because even that duality of meditating is the idea that you're meditating is an obstacle to.
Right, because then there's a meditation and a not meditation.
Yeah. So within Buddhism, there are seemingly all kinds of dualities, right? Like, and also ones that don't really fit in with the scientific worldview, like the idea of karma and reincarnation. Can we reconcile those with the scientific understanding of the universe?
So I find that question kind of interesting, using the word reconcile, because I feel like it's like saying science and spirituality are two very different and separate things. Well, one thing I've really come to understand since leaving science really is that they're not separate and different. They're really just two sides of one coin. There can be some very different sides. It feels very different, but they're just looking at the nature of reality, right? So like karma, for example, right? So as far as I've understood, karma is one of a few natural laws that the Buddha talked about, which he called causal factors, niyamas, right? So they included, he talked about the laws of the non-living, and then the living, and then the laws governing, I don't know, like the weather, and psychology, all that business. So nowadays, of course, we understand that those kind of causal factors become what are known as the fundamental forces in physics. So we have the electromagnetic force, which was electric, and the magnetic force. We have the nuclear forces, strong and weak nuclear forces, and gravity. And they underlie all of science, physics, biology, chemistry, right? So, and in the 20th century, there were all sorts of amazing advances which got Nobel Prizes about starting to unify those forces. So first of all, electricity and magnetism were seen as one. That was in the 19th century. And then electromagnetism was seen as the same as the weak force and then the strong force. And people have been working very hard to try to incorporate gravity in that, Einstein and all sorts of people trying to work out that. So it's like we start to see that these fundamental forces, these separate things, actually start to become seen as being like described, if you like, by one equation or a set of equations which describe them all. Yeah, and like karma is just one of those natural laws of nature. I mean, okay, particularly involves volitional choice, as far as I've understood it, right? So human choice action. Yeah, but as our practice goes along, we start to see those fundamental laws of what govern what appears to be outside nature and inside nature as being also very, very one and the same, right? In physics, at Newton, right? He said, what was it? Newton's third law, wasn't it? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That to me embodies karma, like right there. He's talking about things, right? But we're talking about our volitional action, but kind of the same, right?
Yeah. Maybe we'll eventually have a variable for morality in the equations of physics. I don't know. That's really the mystery of it all, right? If there is some tendency towards reinforcing positive and negative actions that harm and actions that help somehow, because right now physics doesn't seem to distinguish between harmful and helpful actions, or does it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because what may be beneficial for one person is not necessarily beneficial for someone else. What is good, in one way is we start to see that those opposites, again, are just in that kind of world of duality. I mean, it's a really tricky one to understand what it is when we move towards a skillful movement, a skillful action which leads towards some kind of beneficial result. Because, as the Buddha said himself, if you try to work out the full consequences of all your actions, basically your head would explode. It's just not possible. So if we are able to come to that place of seeing our non-separateness, our oneness with the universe, then we see that like this dependent origination, this arising of the whole universe as one. So our actions become the actions of the universe, and the consequences of them can be perceived in different ways. But like we're essentially trying to move towards reducing suffering. And reducing suffering means helping other people to see that perspective where we are all just one with the universe. So I would say that any action which is moving towards helping people to see or understand that knowing, that we are one, we are not separate, that we're not individual in that sense, would be like beneficial in the calming way. I mean, that would be my take.
That seems like a nice thought to end our discussion on, that unseparateness. But is there anything else you wanted to share with us?
So, I mean, I might suggest or invite people who are listening to this to take the opportunity, even if it's not a dark, starry night, to go outside when it's dark every now and again and just kind of look up, just start to look up and see the night sky and see what you see, basically. Just kind of be in that moment, be open, be curious, have that kind of wide-eyed attitude. What is there tonight? And even if it's just orange with a few airplanes, then it's that moment. We pause, we stop, we connect with what our natural world is like at nighttime. And I think that sometimes it can be spectacularly starry and wow, that's amazing. Sometimes it's not as cloudy, but yeah, just inviting people to do that more often.
Just pause and look up with curiosity at the dark sky. Very nice. Well, thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I think we could have spoken for hours more, but this has been a wonderful and gives people some provocative, concrete things they can try themselves to open up to their place in the universe. So, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.